welcome you all to this edition of Business Swansea's Power Hour with our very own trading standards team here at Swansea. Without further ado, I'd like to both thank and introduce you to Rhys Harris and Michelle Morgan from our trading standards team. Trading standards work isn't always visible as they work towards an environment of fair, safe and honest trading here in Swansea. So if, like me, I hope you're excited at the prospect of this fascinating insight into actually how you do that. So Rhys, Michelle, welcome, and over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. Right, so just an introduction to myself. Michelle will introduce herself, and we'll take some of the we'll take turns during some of the slides. So I'm the team leader for Swansea Trading Standards. I have over 20 years experience in trading standards. I've specialised a lot in sort of frauds, counterfeiting, under my umbrella as well, though I also have food hygiene, health protection, and also port health. Over to you, Michelle.
Just an introduction to me. I'm Michelle Morgan, work for Swansea Council for 20-some years now in trading standards. So my experience is that of a fully qualified trading standards officer and an inspector of weights and measures. For the last maybe 10 years or so, I've specialised in food standards work. So happy to meet you all this morning and look forward to giving you a little insight into what business as usual looks like for us.
Bit of a background to the team. We've got 7 trading standards officers. So those are fully qualified officers who are able to do metrology, food, and do the full remit of our function. We've then got 7 enforcement officers who can do a lot of our remit, but there's a couple of elements like food and metrology they can't do. We're now in the process of growing our own, so we've just brought in 2 new apprentices who are going through an apprenticeship to join into the team and to know what we do. And we are growing our team because there is ever a need for us, and there's more and more work coming towards us. So we cover the city and county of Swansea, so everywhere inside the Swansea, but on the odd occasion we also stray outside of our borders. If, for example, an offence has been committed inside our area, we then go outside to gather that evidence if required. Next slide. So what do we cover? So we're all about consumers and businesses. So we take complaints from consumers. Consumers don't contact us directly anymore. For a number of years, that's all gone through Citizens Advice Helpline. We do take direct emails from consumers, referrals from other agencies, whether that be police, HMRC, immigration, and we get referrals from other trading standards into Swansea. But then we also get, part of our regulations is not just about consumer protection, it's also about business protection. So we get complaints by businesses in respect of other businesses, and that can be about things like unfair competition. Shop down the road is selling something I can't legally sell, why should they be allowed to do it? And that's the sort of unfair competition. We also get businesses who prey on other businesses and mislead them into contracts. And we take that information in and then build our investigations going on from there. Next slide. I have recently embraced AI, so you will see a number of my photos in here are AI. So the area of work the trading standards cover is quite vast. So we cover animal welfare of farmed animals in the main. However, because all my officers are animal welfare officers, if we go into business premises or a residential address and we see animals in distress, they are under a legal duty to deal with those animals. We deal with tobacco, vapes, which you've probably seen a lot in the press recently, food standards, metrology. You know, most products that we buy these days are either by weight or by volume. We deal with scams, whether that be email scams or telephone scams, someone pretending to be from Sky or from HMRC. Product safety, so every sort of product that a consumer consumes will have some sort of safety element to it, whether that product's got a specific standard or has generally just got to be safe. We deal with fireworks licensing. We also deal with the safety of fireworks as well, but specifically the licensing. Street trading, so anybody who wishes to trade on a street in Swansea and has a stall on a street has got to come to us for a license. Animal feed is very important, because what we put into our animals that goes into the food chain then goes into us. So we control that element. One of the basic expenses most people buy is properties, so we deal with estate agents. On top of that, any sort of misdescription to consumers or businesses. So there's a huge remit for what we cover, and there's approximately about 3,000 pieces of legislation. Next slide. I thought before we go into some of the areas that we cover, it was important for people to understand what some of our powers are. We used to have powers under a lot of different acts, but very similar to the police now. They've mainly been amalgamated into one piece of legislation. There are some sort of slight differences if you're dealing with food to metrology, etc. But our general powers, we can investigate consumer or business complaints. We've got powers to enter and inspect the business premises, and that is at a reasonable time. And people will ask, well, what is a reasonable time? A reasonable time is the time in which that business is open. So if it's a bakery that's open at 4 a.m. in the morning, it may not be a reasonable time to me, but under law, it's a reasonable time to go in and do that inspection. We've got powers to seize products or documents. We've got powers to take samples. So, for a lot of things, especially when you're looking at food or you're looking at safety, without having that product physically tested, you aren't able to tell if there's some chemicals in it that shouldn't be there. We can apply for warrants. So our powers apply to premises other than solely used as a dwelling. So if we believe there is stuff in a private property, we can apply for warrants. Another one is we can take anyone with us that we require. And I'll give you some examples of that further in the pack. And we've also started to use closure notices and the antisocial behaviour powers in certain circumstances where we're seeing disturbances in an area which are linked to some form of criminality. Next slide. So there is a lot of topics I could cover. So I thought I would just go with some of the popular topics at the moment. So I apologize if I don't pick up some of your guys' areas, but if there's any questions at the end, specifically to an area, happy to take them. So vapes and tobacco is a massive hot topic at the moment. And it's ever evolving, to be honest. So we used to say illegal vapes, anything over 600 puffs was an illegal vape. But since they've brought in the banning of single-use vapes, we've now got vapes which have like 15,000 puffs. But it's all because they use multiple tanks. So any vape has got to have a tank of 2 mil or less, can't have more than 2 mil. And now it must be refillable, rechargeable, and you must change the coil. So what we're finding now is you will find products which will come with 2 mil tanks, and on top of that they will have 10 mil refill bottles to top it up. But I'm not seeing as many illegal vapes as we were before the new single-use vape bill came in. So it is on the decrease. However, I put a couple of pictures in the top there. They are of some vapes that we've seized previously. And I think obviously there's going to be more changing legislation in respect of vapes. My hope is they'll start to restrict things like, you know, colorings, having cartoon characters on there. I want to see the legislation changing to stop making these attractive to children. On the bottom, then we've just got some of the tobacco. So anybody who sells tobacco these days will know it's got to be plain packaged. So it shouldn't be bright colours like that Peaky Blinders, Lambert and Butler down the bottom there. What we're finding is a lot of people are selling plain packaged stuff, which indicates that it's come in from abroad. A lot of the time that is actually counterfeit. And the reason they put it in foreign packaging is an explanation then, because they don't want to buy counterfeit, but they're happy to buy duty free. So we're finding a lot of a combination of both of those. One thing to look out for retail as well is we've seen a lot of instances where someone will go into a shop, ask to see a pack of tobacco. They'll put the tobacco on the counter. They'll say something else to them to distract them, and they'll switch the tobacco and put a different pack of tobacco on the counter. And half the time that packet is then full of bread. And the only time the business owner finds out about it is when they sell that to someone else and we get a complaint that they've been sold a pack of tobacco full of bread. Next slide, please. So I said earlier, we can take whoever we need with us. Top right is Griff. Griff is a tobacco dog which we hire in, and Griff is brilliant. I tend to have a good nose where I can see things have moved, but Griff has found that in the bottom there, there's a little square in the floor that was covered by a shelving unit. Under there's full of tobacco, and the two pictures on the left hand side, that is a concealment up and above a freezer unit, and Griff was sniffing away, bouncing up and down on the floor, wanting to get higher, which led us to have a look, and that's what we find. And Griff, where he's sitting there, is actually indicating, so behind that shelf there's a hole which went into a compartment full of tobacco. Next slide, please. Is that you, Michelle?
Yeah, thank you very much, Reece. That was very good. I've got a lot to live up to here with my slide, I think. Not quite into the land of AI yet, so you'll see my slides are a little less colourful than Reece's. But yeah, just happy to give you a little insight into food standards and what that involves. So the scope really of what we do. So all local authorities have a statutory obligation to enforce food standards legislation. When we say food standards, there is some confusion amongst businesses, understandably so, that covers things like hygiene, scores on the door, but actually it's a separate area of food law that we look at and specialise in. So, for example, there's 22 local authorities in Wales. Stats used to be about 50% of those local authorities had a separate food standards delivery to that of food hygiene. So depending on where you are in Wales, you may get one visit that would cover your hygiene and standards, or you may get 2 visits, which is the case in Swansea. So yeah, we've got a statutory obligation to enforce that food standards legislation. Really what that's all about is food composition, the food information, labelling and advertising of foods, food safety and food traceability. So it's about basically making sure that foods, in whichever manner in which you buy them or they get sold, that consumers have got information that's accurate and that allows them to make safe and informed food choices. So the way in which we do that really as a service area is that we carry out official controls, and what those official controls do is seek to verify compliance then with the relevant food laws that we look at. Largely, we achieve that by a system of risk-based inspection programs. So each year we'll identify a number of businesses that need to be visited, and that's on a risk basis. So currently the system in Swansea, or throughout Wales, England and Northern Ireland really, is that a food standards inspection needs to be carried out on a frequency of either 1 year, 2 years or 5 yearly. And that really depends on the risk as we assess it when we visit the business. On top of that, then you'll probably see published that we do actually have an annual food sampling plan. So like Rhys was alluding to earlier, sometimes you don't know if a food or a product complies with something unless you have it tested or analysed. So each year we identify, based on intelligence and discussions with public analysts and open and closed source information, really what we will target in terms of food sampling. So frequently over the recent years, allergens in food has been high on the agenda to do that, and there does continue to be sort of high levels of non-compliance in that area really. And of course with the risks being potential fatality in consumers, that is always on the sampling plan along with other things that we do. Obviously we are an enforcement authority, so we do go around looking for compliance with food law, but in all those areas we do offer advice to businesses and support to businesses. So we do signpost so that businesses are able to basically help and assist themselves into complying with the requirements for them. On to some of the common problems then, or hot topics, like Rhys said about his vapes and tobacco. And when you come to food standards then, and the common problems with that is that ensuring food is actually what it says that it is, and your customers are getting what they're paying for, and businesses are on a level playing field. So if you've got products or foods that you're selling at a high price, that somebody else isn't undercutting you but actually not providing the food that they say they are. So that's all about protection from things like substitution and adulteration. So no doubt you'll all remember the horse meat scandal and that finding its way into many meat products throughout the entire food chain. But other common misdescriptions then, which would maybe lead people to think that a product is maybe a superior quality than actually what it is. So you have things like reformed meats, which have to be appropriately identified, fishery products. So things like selling ham when actually what you've got is a reformed ham being sold, or maybe a scampi when you're getting a reformed scampi. So there's things like we'll look at the adulteration of honey, which is a pure natural product, to make sure that's not stretched out with syrups. Olive oils, which again have a compositional standard to make sure that they're not being cut with other oils. Are you getting lamb when you see lamb on a menu? Are they actually giving you mutton? Are you getting your cheese, which is a dairy product, or are you getting something artificial or a cheese analog as we know it as? So those sorts of things. So we're out there doing the surveillance, doing the inspections, making sure that there's no substitution of adulteration of all the products across the piece really. So whatever's described to you on the label or on the menu or on the TV or whatever it might be, is actually what you're going to get when you hand your money over really. So other areas are things like claims. So if, for example, you say something's vegetarian, making sure that there's good practices in place to make sure that, yes, the ingredients are suitable for vegetarians, but that they're not cross-contaminated with non-vegetarian ingredients. Things like homemade, are they actually made there? Are they being bought in and just cooked off in the microwave or the cookers? Things like fresh, pure, natural, protected food names. So we audit premises for protected names such as like Welsh lamb, Welsh beef, to pick a couple that would be closer to our hearts, I guess. But things like Parmesan, Prosecco, there's lots of different food and we make sure that where they're used, actually those are the products that people get. On top of that, then things like nutrition and health claims. So if something's low fat, high in fiber, good for you, helps your heart, reduces your weight, we look at all sort of claims like that and make sure that that actually is substantiated or permitted. And as I said in the other slide, we look at the composition of food. So some foods which probably you may or may not be aware of have actually legal compositional standards. So things like, just to pick a few really, jam has to have a certain percentage of fruit and sugar in it. chocolate, we'd look at the percentage of milk solids and cocoa solids. Honey, again, is there any additional ingredients, or has that been adulterated? Meat products, are you getting the correct percentages of meat in your sausages and burgers, if that's how they described? So some of the problems that we have also is on imported foods. So as an authority, we do inland checks on imported foods, and just recently we found quite a lot of problems, I say recently, over recent years, with imported foods, particularly for those foods that are imported from outside of Europe, because the standards are different. So you'll all have been aware probably that when we left the EU, people were worried about trade deals with the US. Would there be a dilution of food standards? Are we going to get hormone-fed beef? Are we going to get chlorinated chicken? So all those sorts of concerns, really. But as I say, what's legal in other countries isn't necessarily always legal here. So we've had problems with US confectionery, soft drinks and snacks containing additives which aren't actually approved for use in the UK. So to put a food additive into a food, that additive has to be assessed and data established to make sure it's safe and safe at what levels. So we continue to find problems with that, really, in terms of what's coming into the marketplace here through import and finding its way inland. So I put a little slide there on allergens, and I think we've got some food businesses in the room. And as I said earlier, we are continuing to get problems with allergen and allergen management. And I just wanted to sort of have a special word about that, really, because it is something that continues to be high on our agenda, because it's at the moment it's causing a lot of non-compliance, and obviously the risks to consumers in terms of safety. Those are serious risks. So as a service, we'll go out and we'll look at the different manner in which foods can be sold. So whether that's pre-packed food labeled by the manufacturers, whether it's non-pre-packed food. So if you've gone to a cafe or a restaurant and you order food and they supply it, or a takeaway, or what we call pre-packed for direct sale foods. And we just go out there and make sure that actually when the allergen information is provided, that it's correct and accurate, and that consumers can rely on that information in order to, again, make safe food choices. Where that goes wrong, and you'll see it probably in the media, but you won't realise the work that goes on behind the scenes. So, for example, if you've got a pre-packed food and we discover through inspections that actually there's allergens being omitted from the label or not properly emphasised on the label, because allergens these days have to be emphasised on a food ingredient list, then that food then has to be swiftly withdrawn from the market to protect consumers. And when necessary, then public recalls are published in order to make consumers aware that actually there's a problem with that labelling, and not to eat or consume the food if you've got the relevant allergy or intolerance. So we do get heavily involved with those as well. So establishing basically how much of the product is on the market, how can we recall it, how can we make the food safe then before it goes back on. So that probably just gives you a little bit of an insight into the broad sort of area of food standards. Happy to let Rhys go forward with the next slide. If any questions later, obviously ask me if there's any specifics, and we can have a little chat about that. And there's always signposting, which we can do as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And really just to emphasize that point on allergen management, everybody only hears about it when we're out doing an inspection, or it's hitting in the news as someone is either severely taken into hospital or died. So it is really important for all businesses to get this right, because if you get it wrong, there is the ultimate consequences. If someone really has a bad allergic reaction, it could kill them. And we have in the past had people taken into hospital for allergens as a result of eating something which was declared as not being in there. So if there's something people take away from this, I really want to sort of emphasize that, to be honest. Right. Next slide. Difference for food hygiene. As I said at the start, I also sort of cover our food hygiene team. and I'm not going to go in great depth. And Michelle has covered some of it, but in Swansea we run 2 services, so there'll be the food hygiene team, and the difference is they come out and they look at your structure, the hygiene at the premises at the time, confidence in management. So that'll be things like your safer business, better food pack, SFBB, or your HACCP, depending on the type of processes in which you're undertaking, and then the practices that are being employed in that premises. So when they come out, they again risk assess you the same as food standards, and you may have a totally different assessment from a standards to a hygiene issue. And that's where you'll get your food hygiene rating, which will then have to be displayed on entry to the business. But yeah, they are in Swansea. We are two separate visits, and they are emphasised on 2 separate areas. Next slide. I'm known with my kids the Labubu killer. So I have spent many an hour pulling a head, foot, or hand off a Labubu. And in the top there, you can see one of the Labubu's eyes has popped out. Just to confirm, that is definitely a counterfeit Labubu. Nothing against the brand. I don't understand the trend, but it is a TikTok trend. So one of the areas is product safety and toys, and it is an area I've focused on personally in the last year or two, because these products are the stuff that are in the hands of our next generations. So I wanted to just put on things here of what to avoid, and I'll give you a couple of things to spot now. All toys will either be CE marked or UKCA. Everybody knows the CE mark as being a European standard mark. Some would call it China export, but it is a mark of a standard that is in the UK or Europe. Since we've moved out of Europe, we've now got the UKCA mark. So any product that now comes in to UK must have a name and address from a manufacturer importer. It's really important, because if we have a product here in Swansea, I go and look at it, I need to know who's responsible for that in the UK. When they bring it into the UK, they've got all the testing certificates done before they place it on the market. So before it gets to the shops in Morriston, it should be tested, it should be safe. There'll be warnings on all toys. I don't know a toy that hasn't got a warning on it. There'll be 0 to 3 warnings. You may have, there'll be all sorts of warnings on it. Do not use, do not use, do not use, giving exemptions. There'll always be instructions for use, and how to use that product safely. If you're not seeing that information on that product, if you're buying it in from a wholesaler, don't touch it. Contact us. We can give you advice if you're feeling uncomfortable. I've got no problem with that. I much prefer saying to someone, look, I can have a look at it, or I can have a photo of it. If it's got X, Y, and Z on it, great. If not, don't touch it. Things to avoid would be branded products. So for example, top right there, I don't know if anybody knows their cartoon characters, but that's Lilo and Stitch, Disney film. You'll see on that, it's not a big photo, but there's no branding of Disney on it. So if there's no branding of that brand, again, it's not going to be genuine, because brands stick as much as they can of their brand all over it. Again, no UK address, importers, don't touch it. And if there is, I see a lot of products really small writing, which you can barely read, and the warnings are so small or they're blurry. Again, to me, that's an indication not to touch it. A couple of things here. So everybody knows the Labubus. Underneath there, you've got a Pokemon purse. That's counterfeit. To the right, you've got an Avengers bucket hat. And then the ones on the top, the Lilo and Stitches. On the first Lilo, you may be able to see just by the pink, above the pink nose, there's a little round circle Well, that's a suction cup. So you suck it and you stick it to a window. Everybody thinks great. That suction cup has got something called phthalates in it. Those phthalates can cause birth defects in unborn children. They can prevent children developing correctly. And the way that you ingest phthalates into the skin is not by touching it, but ingesting it via the mouth. And that's in a suction cup. And that is going to be a direct hazard to any children who have it. So, you know, it's not just about that. It's not a legitimate lilo. It's the fact that it's got a chemical hazard. Like I said earlier, you can't always tell whether that's there or not. Next slide. Cosmetics. Cosmetics are a sort of big area. And it's a cosmetic is anything that is applied to the skin, nails, hair to enhance it. So, you know, any of your beauty makeup, shampoos, all these are sort of cosmetics. You'll always find on them, there will be an ingredients. Aqua is water. You'll never see water on a label for cosmetics. It'll always be aqua. There'll always be instructions for use, how to use it. Contraindications, warning markers. You know, if something happens, don't do it. Again, it'll have UK CA on it or CE, but it'll have a name and address of a UK importer or manufacturer. Have a best before date. We don't all associate cosmetics with the best before date, but there's a little expiry date on the little tub on the bottom left. So it'll say it'll have an open lid and it'll have 6 months or 12 months. And that is an indication once you open it, you've got 12 months to use it. And then on top of that, it'll also have the weight on it. So it'll tell you the volume. Next slide, please. I did say I was embracing AI generated images, didn't I? So electricals, another area of safety which we're sort of highly involved with. And when I asked it to generate this, one thing I want to emphasize is 2-pin plugs. We have 3-pin plugs in the UK, and that is the only plug that can be sold in the UK. You wouldn't believe how many times we go to shops and we find products with 2-pin plugs on. So it applies to anything that is connected to the mains. So if you've got, for example, a lamp which runs off batteries, that's a low voltage product. So it's not an electrical product. It'll you know, you could get the shock off it, but it wouldn't be the shock you get off an electric mains. So this is pretty obvious, but any electrical products must be safe. They must have a UK approved plug on it. So when you turn a plug up, either on the bottom or on the top of the plug, it'll have the BS mark, it'll BS, and it'll have the British standard number on it. And it'll also have an approval body and it'll say who it's approved by. All electricals, again, have got to have an indication of who the UK manufacturer importer is and instructions for use. On top of that, there are some other regulations in respect of WEEE, which is the waste equipment regulations. So then it gives you instructions of how to dispose of it, etc. So the common issues we see are 2-pin plugs. We've seen in the past a lot of issues with USB plugs. So if you have a plug and it's an adapter, it's not, and that is its own electrical device. So you'll stick a USB cable into it to charge your phone or to charge your watch. And we find a lot of issues in that plug where they haven't got like a secondary device. So the wires will be connected to the circuit board via solder, and there'll have to be a secondary device to prevent that from breaking. And the main thing for that is so it doesn't have the 240 crossover from the 240 side to the 5-volt side, so your phone doesn't get fried, or you don't get fried when you're plugging it in. Products shouldn't have access to live parts. So if you can get a finger in anywhere, touch a product, that will be an issue. That again can be an issue in things like toys and other products, which may be battery operated. And then plugs. When you look at a plug, we have a British standard plug. The pins are all the same size. The pins are sheathed on the bottom too, and it'll always be the same size. And the thing is, so when you put your fingers around it, little kid puts their fingers, they can't touch the live points. So if you see a plug which is really narrow and to the prongs, it's probably a non-compliant plug. Next, underage sales. Where my AI issue went slightly wrong. We don't do many test purchases for guns in Swansea, I must admit, but they are age restricted, as you would expect. So age restricted sales, we're responsible for a number of areas. So alcohol, cigarettes, vapes, knives, crossbows, gas. So that gas could be butane gas, or the sort of area where it's a little bit grey, where you believe that someone may be misusing it, so they're taking or they're buying some type of gas to sniff it. Cinema, DVDs, videos, fireworks, and the list goes on. What we do is we take in intelligence from parents, from other businesses, about businesses in an area, because you tend to get a lot of potential ASB happening in and around areas where kids are getting fireworks or they're getting alcohol, and then that has a knock on to the sort of surrounding area. So we get that intelligence in, and then we work, depending on the type of product, with partners, and we send children in to buy a product to see if it is available to children. And our children don't lie, so they don't go in with fake IDs, etc. If we have intelligence that that people are lying to them, we may test that. But our children come in, they present of the age that they're at, so 15, 16, and they would attempt to purchase a product. And then following that, we would then come in afterwards and speak to the individual in the shop. So there'd be two things there really. Under some of the legislation, it would be the staff member would also commit an offence, as well as the business owner. So we used to issue fixed penalties for alcohol sales to staff members where they've sold anybody under the age of 18. So it's worth reinforcing that with your staff. Next slide. And hand over to you, Michelle. Weights and measures.
Oh, thank you very much. I can see time is getting away with us a little bit, but weights and measures probably is a little bit what it says on the tin there, really. Reece mentioned metrology earlier, by which we mean legal metrology and not to be confused with meteorology. So we are a local weights and measures authority, and every local weights and measures authority must employ weights and measures inspectors sufficient to carry out the enforcement within its area. We also must have a chief inspector of weights and measures. That's Reece, that's just been doing the rest of the slides for you. Just to give you some idea of the importance, I think, of weights and measures and how it impacts on businesses and consumers alike, really. It was estimated some years back now that around £1 billion of goods is sold by weight or measure per week in the UK. Again, that's an old audit office statistic that I'm quoting, so you can probably up that now. Cost of living crisis, people are really trying to make their money go further these days, so it is really exceptionally important that for so many things that are sold by weight or volume that you're actually getting what you pay for. So things like spirit measures, when you go to the pub and you buy your spirits, which are sold by volume, so prescribed spirits, gin, rum, vodka, whiskey, have to be sold by 25 or multiples thereof, or 35 or multiples thereof. So we would test that the delivery of those optics, or the delivery via a thimble measure, that they're accurate, so that again you can trust what volume you're drinking, and that what you've paid for is what you've got. Sticking with sort of public houses, then you've got like pint glasses. So if you buy in your beer or lager, cider by the pint, that those glasses are tested by inspectors statistically where they're produced, and we can also test where they've been used to deliver a particular product, whether that be, as I say, lager or cider. We can test then using testing equipment whether actually you're getting the full amount that you're paying for. So when you pull into your petrol forecourt, whether you're diesel, petrol, LPG, the local weights and measures authority will carry out tests to put those equipment into service, and then carry out in-service tests to make sure that they're actually delivering what it is they say they're delivering. So if you put up 50 litres in your car, to make sure that you're actually getting 50 litres in your tank. I always say ish, because in legal metrology terms, life is always a little bit of ish. So there's a plus or minus on everything. So there's always a legal tolerance, a little bit either side, that it's allowed to be inaccurate. But we make sure that those tight legal tolerances are adhered to. So weighbridges, public weighbridges and other weighbridges, a lot of money goes across weighbridges. So we would get a weighbridge unit down, which is a massive lorry with block weights, and we test those weighbridges up to 50 ton to make sure that actually the weights that are going across those for whatever commodity, sometimes more expensive commodities than others, say sometimes it's a public weighbridge, to make sure that is fair and just. Jewellery scales, that's been quite popular recent years. So people selling for gold, buying for gold, the price. So we test them. They need to be accurate because they're more precise than a scale that would be weighing apples and pears, for example. So they're a higher accuracy scale. So we would actually have to hire in accurate weights of higher accuracy, rather local standard accuracy weights, to come in and test those to make sure again that those high value commodities that are going over them are actually correctly being weighed. Shop scales, we see them all the time. We're in Tesco's, whether you self-serve and you weigh in on your self-serve or whether it's through the counter. Again, we'll check those. We can put them in services, tight legal tolerances on all of those. Hospital scales, let's hope they are right, because if you're administering anaesthetic, for example, based on someone's weight, then again, all of these things are, extremely important. Things like length measures, material, sold by length. So just some examples there, really, of how that touches on everybody's life. So I always say a day in the life of inspector. You get up in the morning, you put your toothpaste on, that toothpaste is packed to a quantity, you jump in your car, you put your fuel in, that we've tested that, it just goes on. You open your cupboard of food, all those foods with the bins, the beans, tomatoes, etc., they're all packed to average quantity. We are there in the factories testing to make sure that you're getting what you pay for. So that's that's just a quick little insight into weights and measures. So I guess I better let Reese move on, because we're coming up to an hour just now.
Just to say, I hate testing beer, because we ask someone to pour us a pint of beer, and then we put this chemical in it which totally wrecks it, and it's got to be destroyed straight after, and it just seems such a waste. But yeah, right, next one is rogue traders. Quickly run through this. So rogue traders, it's a very generic term, but it's people who target consumers. So we tend to talk about people who are going round to properties, offering roofing services, gardening services, contacting people. And there seems to be a common theme with this. Someone will drive past, knock on their door and say, "Oh, we've just noticed you've got a tile missing." Within an hour, that has escalated to that person then needing a new roof. It ends up people being delivered to the bank to get money out. And then we end up in a situation where work doesn't get completed. The work that has been completed is to a very poor standard. And you end up having consumers in a position where they're worse off than they were before they started. And We've got a couple of cases on the go at the moment where we've got consumers whose houses have been, well, they're now unmortgageable because and they're unlivable where they were living in them previously. I'm going to shoot straight on to the next one. Just other issues, really. There was a huge list of legislation at the front, and I haven't covered half of it. But we do talk scam talks and give advice to consumers and to businesses because it's one of those areas that you can't quantify what your success is, but stopping one or two consumers from being scammed out of their life savings is worth it in my eyes. And just getting that message out there to the vulnerable people. And it's not even just to that. We have conversations with kids in schools, because kids in schools go home, talk to their parents, speak to their grandparents, and just that conversation, helping that conversation go, because a lot of scam victims are scared and afraid and embarrassed to say anything. Animal welfare, I said at the start, normally farmed animals, not going to mention anything more there. Pricing, we're responsible for pricing, so a consumer should know the price of a good before they go to the counter. It should be inclusive of all taxes and anything associated to it. And it's been like that for time and a day. There's always little changes with it, but a consumer should know the price, so when they go to that counter they shouldn't be embarrassed that they can't afford something. Descriptions, either stated or implied, so if someone tells you something, okay, that could be a misdescription, or by not telling you something. So for example, if you were buying a car and the trader forgets to tell you that it's a certain type of write-off, that would be a misdescription as well. And then we deal with other things like single-use plastics, so plastic forks. Don't blame us for plastic straws in McDonald's, but yes, we do cover it. And there's over 3,000 pieces of legislation that we cover. Next slide. Where to get advice. So I just put this up there. So consumers always say to businesses, we're going to trading standards. But in effect now they go to Citizens Advice, and the Citizens Advice helpline is there. But there are a number of places for business advice as well. So Business Companion. On there are lots of guides covering lots of areas of trading standards work, things like fire and furniture regulations, clothing, soaps, all sorts of stuff. The second one down is OPSS. So that's where you'd get things about product recalls. So I think about a week ago, there was a product recall on sand, which potentially had asbestos in it. So that's the type of place where you can sign up and they'll notify you of the type of products that have been recalled. And finally there's the food.gov, and that's where you find a lot of guidance in and around the food issues. With all of these legislation that we talk about, there are some minor tweaks between Wales and England, depending if some of it is devolved. So always with those guidance, just check what area it's applicable to. And this is how to contact us. We've got a section on our website, on the council website. We are trading.standards at swansea.gov.uk. I'd encourage you to use that rather than to phone us, because I would make a misdescription to you if I was going to tell you that you get through our call centre in 5 minutes. So it's always better put an email through to us. We've got a manned, our email is manned 5 days a week, so we can pick that up, and if it's just to call back, we can call you back. There are a couple of other services we provide, things like business support, business advice. Some of that depends on how much work it is. If it's very bespoke, we do have a paid for service, but we can also, if it's generic advice, we can signpost you to places, and then if you need to come back with more specific advice, then you can come back to us. That's it for me, so I'll happily open it up for questions. I apologise, I can talk hind end off a donkey, so I've gone on a bit, but it's a very wide subject.
No, Reece, Michelle, thank you for that. That's a hugely informative presentation. Thank you. And it's fascinating just to learn of that broad remit of your team, and not just the broad remit, but the detail to which you go to carry out your work as well. So thank you. So yeah, just to open up to people who are with us who viewed that, to just answer any observations or questions you may have, just pop a hand up.
Oh, hello. Good morning, and thanks.
Morning.
Firstly, I didn't realise that there was so much skullduggery and crime out there that you deal with. My question, and what I came on really to find out about is, do you see yourselves as a local service? And so I'm noticing that more business is international these days, and there's ever so much that you're dealing with online, and the company is provides no contact details, only through their filter system, and there's very poor complaints governance very often, no telephone number, or a telephone number that refers you to multiple choice options on a website, and no email. Just for example, I had an occasion recently where I was trying to get an issue resolved with a company that acknowledged that the issue was a technical one within themselves, and I was locked for a week in an identity verification loop with AI. And it took me at least the last 3 or 4 days of that to get a human intervention that eventually very quickly resolved the problem. I had another issue recently with, perhaps I should mention that it was Gumtree, and I had an issue that I couldn't resolve on the website, and I had to turn it into a complaint, and that took about 4 days to get a human response. With a lot. Do you deal with that sort of thing? Do you see that as outside, or is it beyond your scope, or how do you deal with that, please?
Yeah, so a couple of things. As I said, we're Swansea based, so we will deal with any traders in Swansea. So if a consumer in Carmarthenshire had a complaint about a trader, whether they dealt with them in person or online, they would refer that into Swansea because the trader is based here. Under the e-commerce regulations, one of those 3,000 regs that I mentioned, and the e-commerce regulations, it is a requirement on a business, if they are providing a service or goods online, they must put a geographical name and address. It's not a requirement for a telephone number, but it must be a name and address, because a consumer or another business must be able to serve documents on them in person. So if they decided to take a civil action against them, there should be somewhere to go. Slightly different where you've got a platform. So obviously eBay, Amazon, Gumtree, a lot of those have sellers on the platform. And if they are sellers who are businesses, they must display their details on there. But then if they're private individuals, then the way to deal with that would be to go via Gumtree, eBay, Amazon's complaints procedure, and then there'll be a complaints procedure in there for that. But it depends on what the problem then was, whether it would come to trading standards, whether it was a criminal matter or a civil matter. So we'd always point people to citizens' advice. They sort of triage some of the stuff that would come to us, and they give the civil advice if it's civil, or they pass the criminal stuff to us.
Right.
If that,
yeah. So what advice do you give if the company is international and there's no address on their website, and you're in a contractual relationship and you're feeling that the way you're treated isn't fair?
I probably, and you'd hear this a lot from me, I'd probably need to know more about the detail of that contractual relationship, because it wouldn't be right for me to comment on it generically without specifically knowing the detail. We do get a lot of consumer complaints that, you know, I've bought some Calvin Klein, I've bought it off Etsy, and it's come in from China. We can't deal with, we've got no powers to control outside of the UK. However, we can go to other areas of the UK, or we can refer it to trading standards in those areas. So sometimes when there are contractual matters with America or somewhere else, we have no power. It's outside of our jurisdiction, as it were.
Thank you. I think that's one of the risks of trading overseas, isn't it, or going abroad? And I guess that you carry that risk, don't you, as a consumer?
And
in many ways.
it does depend a lot of like like Amazon have a base in the UK as well now. So depending on the platform and stuff, they may be a legal entity in the UK to be able to speak to.
I think it's not just trading, that an increasing amount of commerce is international, isn't it? So
yes, I agree.
I hope you've got a corner of your department looking at how that's dealt with.
That is slightly above my head. That sits at a national level, I'm afraid. But yeah, there is people who do engage with the commerce from in and outside the country.
Thank you for your question, Michael. Conscious that obviously we're here as Business Swansea, and we support businesses that are with a range of different grants, and one of which is the Pre-Start grant, which is helping businesses establish for the first time their venture here in Swansea and selling to both consumers and businesses alike here. Rhys, Michelle, I just wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to any individual that is looking to set up a business here in Swansea for the first time, selling to consumers? What advice would you give them in respect to helping them from a trading standards perspective?
I'd really engage people to contact us on that email address, and we can certainly start to get you the links into different areas. Obviously, if it's a food business, they need to be food registered. And we do have a service via our food team who will come out and give some pre-visit information, so they'll have a look around as if you have in your original meeting, and that helps a lot of new businesses because they don't necessarily know what some of the scoring matrix is their first business, so that's quite helpful. But again, I'd really ask people just to come to us, and we'll signpost you to specific advice, give you advice on pitfalls. And I prefer to talk to people up front rather than having to go in their doors and telling people off. It's a lot easier having that conversation up front.
Fantastic. So come speak to us. Thank you. So just on behalf of Business Swansea, Michelle, Rhys, thank you very much for your time this morning in the content. Thank you to those that joined us live. Michael, thank you for sticking with us to the very end. And we hope those that are watching this on YouTube are finding an informative session. Please note that legislation does change, so the best thing to do is just get in contact with Trading Standards and just get an update straight away if you're watching this after on the recorded session. Otherwise, thank you very much once more, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you. Thank you, Rhys. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Bye.